Was Renly Baratheon's green armor enchanted? Let's talk about it. So really quick before we get into the video, my name is Estella Graves, and if you enjoy fantasy content, if you enjoy A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Lord of the Rings, Witcher, Skyrim, etc., feel free to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel so I can continue to make fun fantasy content in the future. So this is a theory that I've seen floated around on various corners of the internet, and I recently talked about it on my TikTok, where I've been making A Song of Ice and Fire content for about a year or so now, and I could not find any videos on YouTube regarding this theory, so I figured it could be kind of fun to talk about. Obviously, as previously stated, this is not my theory per se. I'm going to be kind of reiterating some stuff that I've seen online, but I will be adding my own insights to it. So in the A Song of Ice and Fire books, Renly Baratheon has a stunning set of green armor that was crafted for him by Tobo Mott. And you'll probably remember Tobo Mott because he was the blacksmith that Gendry trained under in King's Landing. In the show, the armor itself is kind of like a coppery gold color. I mean, there is some green velvet elements to it, but it's notable that in the book, the metal itself is like bright green. So the basis of this theory kind of exists around the fact that Tobo Mott is from Cahors. And now what does that mean? So in Cahors, the blacksmiths are specifically trained in kind of ways of magical spell crafting, in forging, weapons and steel. And it is notable that in Cahors, this is really the only place that now holds the secret for reworking and reforging Valyrian steel, making Tobo Mott one of the only characters in Westeros that can do this. And the knowledge to do this, to rework and reforge Valyrian steel, is like a jealously guarded secret. In the World of Ice and Fire, Maester Pole of the Citadel went to Cahors to try and kind of unlock some of these secrets. He was like whipped and banished multiple times, and on the third time his hand was removed. And they claimed it was because he tried to steal a Valyrian steel artifact, but Maester Pole himself said the true reason was because he discovered their secrets. And the specific secret to reworking and reforging Valyrian steel, he said, was blood sacrifice. They were sacrificing slaves as young as, very small babies in order to bring forth these kind of fantastical weapons that rivaled the weapons and armor that they had in the Valyrian freehold. And knowing what we kind of know about Valyria and dragon magic and fire and blood, this doesn't seem that outlandish, which is kind of upsetting and kind of spooky, but very fun. I absolutely love when George goes kind of full horror with some of his stuff. So, Tobo Mott knows how to do this special kind of magical crafting, and this isn't like a theory in itself, it's basically fact. He brags about his ability to Ned. And this is a direct quote from one of Ned's chapters when he speaks with Tobo Mott when he's meeting Gendry for the first time. So it says, "The Knight of the Flowers bought all of his armor here," Tobo boasted, "and many high lords, the ones who knew fine steel, and even Lord Renly, the king's own brother, perhaps the Hand had seen Lord Renly's new armor. The green plate with the golden antlers? No other armor in the city could get that deep a green. He knew the secret of putting color into the steel itself. Paint and enamel were the crutches of a journeyman. Or perhaps the Hand wanted a blade. Tobo had learned to work Valyrian steel in the forges of Cahors as a boy, and only a man who knew the spells could take old weapons and forge them anew. The direwolf is the sigil of House Stark, is it not? I could fashion a direwolf helm so real that children will run from you in the streets," he vowed. So remember that. So he is not using paint, he's not using enamel, he's using a secret third thing, likely blood magic, and he tells Ned he could make him a direwolf helm so real that children will run from him in the streets. That'll be important for later. I think it's also notable that a key component to Tobo Mott's outfit from the books was not included in the show. So in the books and in the show, he's kind of dressed as fits his station, and he really only has like one notable costume detail. In the books, Ned notes that he is wearing a heavy silver chain with a large sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg. And you might be saying, why is this important? Obviously, Tobo has been established as a character who can craft magical and enchanted weapons and armor, and we know throughout the series that other characters who practice sorcery wear enchanted jewelry. Obviously, Melisandre is the first character to come to mind with her tight gold choker that has a ruby set at the center. It's almost a polar opposite in description to Tobo's heavy silver chain with the large sapphire. Other characters that come to mind with possibly enchanted jewelry are Shiera Seastar, Bloodraven has his moonstone brooch, and in the books, Xaro Xhoan gifts Daenerys Targaryen a choker with a purple stone in it that is supposed to ward off poisons using magic. And I really wish we would have gotten this in the show, but as previously established, the show's aesthetic was much more toned down and realistic, so it makes sense why we didn't get this very fantastical piece of jewelry on a seemingly random character. I still would have really liked to see it, and I think it's a very strange detail for George to note. So, as established, magical armor exists in this world, and so does magical jewelry, and magic wearers often wear magical necklaces in order to enhance their powers, so it's not out of the question to say perhaps Tobomont has created for himself a magical necklace, and perhaps this necklace enhances his ability to reforge and rework Valyrian steel, or craft enchanted armor, etc. I mean, considering his ties to magic and Valyria and these kind of mysteries of Cahor, it can't be a coincidence, right? I don't know, I feel like this detail may just add a little bit of extra mystery and fun and magic to this theory. But that is enough musings on the person who created the armor. Let's move into the next part of the theory. So, reason number 2 that people believe Renly's armor may have been enchanted is because at the Battle of the Blackwater, his armor is described as kind of ghostly, and many of the people who witnessed the battle themselves believe they encountered Renly's ghost. So, this is from Tyrion's first chapter in A Storm of Swords. It says, and this is Tyrion, "Is it true that Stannis was put to rout by Renly's ghost?" Bronn smiled thinly. "From the winch towers, all we saw was banners in the mud and men throwing down their spears to run. But there's hundreds in the potshops and brothels who will tell you how they saw Lord Renly kill this one or that one. Most of Stannis' host had been Renly's to start, and they went right back over at the sight of him in that shiny green armor." And so this is Davos 2 when he's talking to Salladhor Saan. It says, "King Renly's shade was seen as well," the captain said, "slaying right and left as he led the Lion Lord's van. It is said his green armor took a ghostly glow from the wildfire and his antlers ran with golden flames. Renly's shade." Davos wondered if his sons would return as shades as well. So it's interesting to me that not only is the armor itself kind of described as ghostly from this wildfire, some really interesting imagery from George, but people also believe that they have seen Renly's ghost in the armor, inhabiting the armor, or in some way the essence of Renly appeared and kind of, convinced these men to go back over to him. And so we already have this kind of language and precedent around the idea that the person who created this armor, or can create similar armor, can do spells and do magic to imbue emotional reactions out of other people, to make people terrified. He probably could also make armor to inspire loyalty, which is seemingly what is happening here. So, Renly's enemies are seeing this armor and they're fleeing in terror, or again, it is inspiring loyalty and his men are going back to him. And on top of that, we have, all of these references to ghosts and ghostly things, these kind of more fantastical, magical elements in this world. Obviously, we know this is not Renly's ghost. In the books, it is Garland Tyrell. In the show, it is Loras, but in the books, there's a really interesting bit of character building with Loras where he wanted to wear the armor, but he was too small. But, subtle characterization gets thrown out the window by D&D because we can't have too many Tyrells running around. So, in the books, it is Garland who wears this armor. It is not Renly, but even still, he is able to evoke that emotional reaction out of people. And it's assumed that some people probably saw him close up in this battle, but still so many people went to his side and are still talking about they saw Renly, they saw Renly. So clearly it was evoking something in these people. So armor that possibly kind of subtly changes how the wearer is perceived sounds like glamour magic to me. And it's notable that when Melisandre talks about glamour magic regarding, Mance Rayder and the Lord of Bones and, this rattle shirt armor, that she says the best glamour magic uses bits of the person. So, bits of hair, bits of bone, etc. And so, you can take that and you can say, if the bones, help Mance in order to evoke this image, what could an entire set of green armor do? Specifically bespoke armor made for Renly, possibly using ancient Valyrian blood magic. And so with those, 2 points established, we then get into, well, what was this armor enchanted to do? Because clearly it wasn't enchanted to stop crazy shadow baby demons from killing Renly. And as previously stated, it seems like, in most of these theories propose that the armor was possibly enchanted to inspire awe, inspire loyalty, inspire fear in Renly's enemies, because we have to remember that at heart, he was a politician. He wasn't really a warrior. He was all about appearances, and he was all about, getting people to like him, and he was very good at it. So this armor probably just enhanced that maybe a little bit. And so it would make sense that he would commission and have a set of armor that enhances his, best and most natural qualities to really just make him seem like the best leader out there. Because when you think about it, Renly really has no claim other than his popularity. He kind of needs something to, prop him up against better claimants, and, what better way than using a little bit of magic? And you'd think that if it was, magically enchanted armor, maybe it would safeguard against other magic, but clearly Renly was never intending to use this armor to actually fight, so I feel like it would be, again, more fitting and kind of ironic if it was magically enchanted and absolutely useless. And so now getting into the third reason why people think Renly's armor may have been enchanted is because Catelyn Stark seemingly has like a premonition, or at the least like some very heavy-handed foreshadowing from George R.R. Martin regarding her fate and regarding this armor. So this is in Catelyn's second chapter in A Clash of Kings. It says, "Besides the entrance, the king's armor stood sentry, a suit of forest green plate, its fittings chased with gold, the helm crowned by a great rack of golden antlers. The steel was polished to such a high sheen that she could see her reflection in the breastplate, gazing back at her as if from the bottom of a deep green pond, the face of a drowned woman." Catelyn thought, "Can you drown in grief?" And so we can look at this passage and say, was this a little bit of, foreshadowing for Catelyn herself? Was this a bit of a premonition, of a glimpse of the future that she saw in this magical armor? Or was this just a little bit of literary fun the author was having for the readers to kind of see and interpret and look back on later on? Either way, it is continuing to connect this armor to the idea of ghosts and spooky things and foreshadowing and kind of these more magical elements in the story. And now we're gonna go on a little side tangent and look at Renly's costume in the show. It goes without saying that I'm a big costume and fashion nerd. I love discussing the hidden symbols in costumes, and I love seeing how costumes really lend to the visual storytelling and world building. Now, Renly's costume in the show clearly does not touch on the possible supernatural elements. I mean, a lot of the kind of fantastical and magical aspects in these books are toned down for a more realistic, worldview in the show, but I do think the costume does a good job showing us who Renly's character is visually in a very short amount of time. And if you haven't read these books, you may be saying, what are you talking about? The show is very high fantasy, very high magic. There's dragons, there's White Walkers, there's shadow demons. Trust me, the books are like that times 100. They are much more colorful, much more fantastical. There are magical artifacts, magical armor, magical swords, magical horns. It is just overall way more high fantasy. So in the Game of Thrones costume book, Michelle Clapton has coined this as a kind of brigandine-style armor, and she has specifically connected it to Loras Tyrell. I think this is very smart because obviously we need to see that these two characters are allied, and you could say, well, obviously he is allied with the Tyrells because he's wearing green, but in the show, the Tyrells don't really wear green that much. The only Tyrell we actually really see wear green is Loras. I mean, yes, Marjorie very briefly wears green for like one moment, but we're not talking about the issue of the Tyrells not wearing their house colors. We're talking about the thematic merit of Renly's green armor and what it means for his character in the show. Anyways, back to Renly, Loras, and green armor. So not only having their armor match in color, but in style is kind of this nice connecting through line for their characters, even if the writing doesn't really connect them very much later on. Loras very quickly forgets about Renly in the show. Another thing I think about when seeing Renly's green armor in the show and reading about it in the books is this idea of green as grass. And this is a saying that is used to describe men who are young, who have lived in the summer, have not seen the winters, they're not tested in battle, etc. And I mean, this really just describes Renly to a T. I mean, he's the youngest brother, he's deeply unserious, and he's never really seen battle. And another thing that is really interesting to me about Renly's armor in this show is that it is covered in velvet. There is so much velvet going on, and it really evokes this image of a stag that still has velvet on its antlers. It hasn't quite tested itself in battle yet. And so he's wearing this beautiful kind of velvet doublet, and the only real protective pieces are his gorget and his shoulder pads, which are clearly very decorative with this kind of beautiful gold scroll work and these stag antlers. And obviously the metal gorget is not green in the show. I'd kind of headcanoned for myself that it was copper as a reference to a quote from Donald Noy, but alas, Michelle Clapton has said it was gold, so I think I'm kind of just searching for some symbolism in these costumes that may not be there. It's maybe a little bit too much of a reach. Even the way he has this cape kind of draped across the front of his armor shows that he's a very fashionable character, much more concerned with appearances than he is with practicality. And so what this costume does in a very short amount of time is it visually showcases to us who Renly is as a character. You know, Renly is vain, he's kind of green, he's out of his element, he's not actually a warrior, he's just kind of pretending to be a warrior. He's a bit vapid and he cares a lot about his appearance and he wants to be seen as charismatic. So of course he's going to buy some beautiful armor that's going to enhance his natural charisma, maybe even enhance it kind of magically, because let's be real, he needs all the help he can get because his claim isn't very good. It also is clearly playing on these ideas that, you know, beautiful people are seen as good, so of course he's going to want this beautiful, glorious, shiny armor, etc. And it gives us this through line between book and show Renly, because the same person that would wear this beautiful velvet armor that is bright green would also commission a possibly enchanted set of useless armor. Even though it's slightly different from the book counterpart, this costume really does stay true to the essence of Renly's character, and I think it's one of the more beautiful sets of armor in the show, so I can't be mad at it. Anyways, costume rant over, let's get back to the theory at hand about Renly's armor possibly being enchanted. And now, getting a little more speculative, I feel like I should be trading this little circlet for a tinfoil hat. Let's talk about what this armor might be kind of telling us for the future. So, this armor might be showing us, you know, what Valyrian magic looks like simply on regular steel armor. Obviously, we have seen some glamour magic with the, you know, rattle shirt bone armor, and we've possibly seen some type of old Valyrian glamoury magic on regular steel. But what would this type of ancient magic look like on a set of Valyrian steel armor? And dear viewer, it just so happens that there is a character who has a full set of Valyrian steel armor who is planning to do a bunch of magical stuff come the next book. If it ever comes out. Sorry to remind you. That's right, I'm connecting Renly Baratheon and his green armor to the Hightower Euron Greyjoy showdown that we're supposed to get in Winds of Winter. Because think about it, you know, stuff in these books come in threes, and, you know, maybe, like I said, we have this magical glamour armor with bones, and then we have this magical armor with regular steel, but it's not quite right because, you know, obviously the smiths in Cahor, they might not have the magic quite right. You know, some of the, you know, Valyrian spellwork seems to be a bit lost, and so you then have Euron, who has this weird ancient armor that he seemingly has gotten from old Valyria that we have no idea what it's about, what it's gonna do. I mean, he has artifacts from Valyria as well, so wouldn't it be interesting if George then continued this through line of, you know, discussing magical armor with Euron's cool Valyrian steel armor? Anyways, that is my kind of cracked speculative addition to this Renly Baratheon armor theory, is that, you know, it's all a setup to give us some interesting information about Euron's magical armor when he has a showdown with the Hightowers, and, you know, we'll see if it holds up against Sam the Slayer. But anyways, that is getting way too speculative even for me and turning this video into something it is not. So with that being said, was Renly Baratheon's armor truly enchanted? Yes. No. Maybe. The real question is, does it really matter? And the answer is, probably not, but it matters in my heart. In reality, what this armor actually does is it reinforces some of the things we know about Renly Baratheon. He is all about appearances, he is a politician, he's not a warrior at heart, and, you know, at the end of the day, he wasn't very good at what he did. It also reiterates to us, the readers, the importance of confidence and these illusions of power and how it affects the characters in this story. And it also gives us some very interesting foreshadowing for Catelyn Stark that may or may not be an in-world premonition. Oh, and it also gives us some very interesting information and world building regarding enchanted weapons and enchanted armor. And lastly, it gives us a touch of irony to learn that Renly's armor was just as Renly himself was described by Donal Noye. Bright and shiny, pretty to look at, but not worth all that much at the end of the day. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Was the armor enchanted? Was it not enchanted? Does it really matter? Again, probably it doesn't, but these kind of theories are just fun and I love discussing them. And if you've made it this far, again, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope to post more content like this in the future. Feel free to leave down in the comment section like tips and tricks or things that you want to see, things you want me to discuss, etc. I will be trying to implement that as I move some of my content from TikTok over to YouTube. Okay, that is it. Bye.